Right, it's time to talk about Andrew Tate. The online influencer has a grip on the mind of our boys, and his influence is anything but positive if you know anything about him. Not only has he been charged with rape and human trafficking, he says women belong in the home, can't drive, and are a man's property. This is what he says. And he's not operating alone. The manosphere, the term for the websites, blogs and online forums promoting this type of content, is everywhere. It's misogyny disguised as some kind of masculinity, which is not. Now, our own classification office is sounding alarm bells about all of this content. They recently released an extensive report detailing what's out there and the consequences on young male minds. It's really concerning. Chief Censor Flora joins me now to discuss the findings. Carolyn, g'day. Welcome to the program. Nice to have you on.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
How concerned are you? I saw that report and read it and thought, man, this is alarming. I've got a 14-year-old boy and boys in my life, and have done for quite some time, and I can see the influence. They look at this stuff. How concerning is it?
It is really concerning. And look, we did this research because we had noticed some things within the work that we classify. So here at the classification office, we have a forensic function, and that is to determine whether publications cross that really high threshold for being banned. And that means that the content is objectionable. And we were noticing through terrorist and violent extremist content a lot of threads of misogyny. So that's why we carried out this research in that really extreme end, but we couldn't ignore how people were being attracted to that type of content. And misogynistic influences, or those that exist in the manosphere and push those ideas of radical feminism and hatred towards women, are dragging people towards those more extreme ideas. And that happens for a number of reasons.
Is this available widely on the net, or is it sort of on the dark web? And is it in places that we can't find, or is it openly available?
So the really extreme content is banned, and what I'm talking about here is like the likes of the Christchurch mosque terrorists manifesto. He had a whole chapter on radical feminism. So did the Oslo terrorists, and I'm not just talking about casual sexism here. I'll read you a little bit about what the Oslo terrorist said. And remember, he killed 77 people, including 69 young people on the island of Utoya, and he writes about men as the victims of radical feminists who would seek to destroy the supremacy of white males and undermine the intrinsic worth of native Christian European heterosexual males. And he writes this to justify the belief that women need to be killed as part of impending civil war. And he warns his followers, and he does have followers, that they must embrace and familiarize yourself with the concept of killing women, even very attractive women. Now, that might sound really extreme, but this isn't just ramblings of a madman. These ideas do get traction amongst those disaffected people who really are attracted to those kind of ideologies. And we know that because they tell us that themselves through their writings, through their manifestos, through the content that comes through this office.
It's utterly delusional. It's deluded and quite frankly so out there that anyone with any common sense, half a brain and some knowledge of the world would just dismiss it.
And sadly, the work of this office has changed over the last couple of years, and particularly since Christchurch. We are seeing more extreme violence, violent extremism, and terrorist content coming through the office. These are live streams of real-world violence. These are manifestos. The other thing we noticed that sparked our interest in doing this research is the emergence of specific terrorist ideologies that are focused on a hatred of women, and they call themselves incels. That means involuntary celibates, and they really have an intense hatred for women, an intense feeling of entitlement for sex, and they hate men who love women as well. It's a really complex ideology, but it is something that we ought to keep an eye on. The New Zealand SIS, in their threat assessment a couple of years ago, did have a look at incel ideology and how it's potentially could manifest here in Aotearoa, and nothing's impossible.
What about guys like Andrew Tate? See, he's quite accessible has been accessible in the past for our young boys, hasn't he?
He is. And as part of this research, we looked at some of the drivers of kind of online misogyny. So just to be clear, nothing that Andrew Tate, we haven't classified any Andrew Tate material. The things that he says are under New Zealand law legal. He has breached platform terms and conditions, so he's been booted off Instagram and other platforms for his extremely misogynistic content. But what our research found is that particularly young men who enjoy engaging with this will be encouraged to jump off those platforms that do moderate their content and go onto those platforms that don't, where they can be exposed to more extreme ideas.
See, misogyny is misogyny, and while it's while it's not a great thing, and not a good thing, it's not illegal in New Zealand. So you can still run the content. The content's still accessible and legal in many ways, isn't it?
That's right. There's nothing illegal about expressing offensive views. And I want to be clear that this office cannot ban anything just because it's misogynistic. What I'm talking about, that extreme content, is where misogyny appears alongside other classifiable content that's normally violence and terrorist content.
So what would you like to see happen from here? So you classify, so you can ban stuff and you can make sure stuff isn't seen, but only to a point. And so what is it that you'd like to see from here? Do you need more powers, or does there another office needs to be set up in terms of banning this sort of stuff? Because I know that was put on hold, wasn't it? So what do we do from here?
I think regulation is only one tool, and honestly, conversations, particularly with young people, are really important. And I think your next guest is going to talk about that. We just released some more research on Monday into the online experience of young people and body image. And I'll read you a quote from a young woman who refers to Andrew Tate. This is the kind of stuff that we need to listen to. We need to listen to young people. She's 15 and she says, I know the boys have been exposed a lot to Andrew Tate content and it's really unnecessary. They say, I love Andrew Tate, I hate women. It's crazy because if they hadn't been on social media, they wouldn't have been exposed to that. And this is in the context of being bullied about their bodies and their images is not living up to the ideals expected of young people who follow or are engaging in misogynistic content.
You see, that's an example of where it's actually having a real impact on people's lives here, and not in a good way, in a way that we've seen and reported on this, that people have taken their own lives as a result of pressure and bullying around body image and so forth, people taking pictures of themselves and posting it on the net. It's just a no-no. Don't do it. Just think, who's going to see this? It stays there forever.
And look, our research into misogyny online also revealed that women and girls are more likely, obviously, to receive harassment and abuse online, but are more likely to be the victims of deep fake pornography, where their likeness is unconsensually put into pornography. One study showed that 80% of the unconsensual pornography of deep fake type online targets women.
You want people like me as a father to sit down with our boys and tell them how to become better men, don't you? You want conversations around the dinner table to be happening regularly, don't you?
I think here at the Classification Office, we provide a lot of tools for parents, educators and young people to have conversations about what they're seeing so that they can make sense of it, so that they can critically think about what they're exposed to, how it's making them feel, how it might be changing their attitudes and behaviors. And yeah, around the dinner table, around any type of content, these discussions are really healthy.
My son goes to, it's now a co-ed Mount Albert Grammar, so they brought in girls a number of years ago. And I think it's actually balanced the school. Beforehand, this was 2,000 young men. And now it's 3,500 young men and young women. And I think it softens the men. And I was talking to the principal about this very topic a couple of weeks ago. And he said it takes that hard edge off their attitudes towards women, and which is a good thing, I think. If they have those attitudes of misogyny, then it takes it away because they've got the young girls in the class with them. So they're sort of confronted by it. So do you think, is there an issue with our schooling system?
Oh, look, I couldn't comment on that. What I would say is that stuff that kids are exposed to online gets easier to process as they get older. And actually our research that we released on Monday tells us that as well, that the body image stuff they find really confusing and impactful when they were younger, but less so when older. And it's probably the same with this misogynistic content or content encouraging problematic behavior between genders. they can make more sense of it when they're older. And so that's a kind of decision for parents about how much social media their young people have, how much they're talking about it, and helping them to make sense of it.
When would you? You may not be able to answer this, and I'll ask Rob the same question. But when should kids, early teenagers, be getting devices and things like that? When's it's such a hard thing to police and manage in a household now. But when should they be exposed to that sort of stuff?
It's really, really difficult to say. What I'd say a couple of things about social media. It's not just content. And look, that's the kaupapa of this office. We've for 30 years looked at what appropriate age content is through films and movies and that kind of thing. It's not just communication either. They're communicating with their friends, they're having fun, they're communicating often with strangers. It is all of it. And the way that the social media platforms are designed, particularly the engagement algorithms. And so one young person's social media experience will be completely different to the next because it's highly individualized for them. And it takes account of who they are, their identity, their age, their interests, who's around them, and potentially how they're feeling, and amplify some of those things. So I would encourage parents to think of social media particularly as an experience that young people are in that is unique to them.
It is such a good chat. It is such an interesting topic. And it's a worrying topic, but it's something that we can, if we're aware of it, at least have the conversations about it,
100%. We really, really encourage those open conversations, and also encourage parents to note the minimum age requirements that the platforms themselves put on. A lot of young people are telling us they're getting around that. And we have some great resources on our website on parental controls, if that is something that parents want to do, on devices, internet settings, gaming, Netflix, all of those.
No, it's fascinating. Hey, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, all the best.
Duncan, Garner.